Bernard Schut we were chatting before. I knew I was going to mangle your name from BIQH. So two things. How do we say your name, and then also how do we say the name of your company? Educate us on that to begin with.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you
Very
for coming.
nice. A big honor, of course. And my name is Bernard Schut, which is a very Dutch name, you could say. So I can imagine it's hard to pronounce, of course.
It's all that. It's back of the throat stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. It's typical Dutch stuff. And I'm working at BIQH. So it's not BIQH, but it's BIQH actually.
Right. So it's spelled BIQH, but you say it as BIQH.
Exactly.
Okay. Did the BIQH stand for anything? Was that something in Dutch?
It was nothing in Dutch, and it's not like an abbreviation for something. You know, I think it was like 8 years ago, we were thinking about rebranding the company, searching for a new name for a database and for the company. And we thought about, we are doing maybe a little bit of big data. We are doing stuff with IQ because it's complicated stuff, you know. Oh, maybe something like BIQH. Oh, yeah, that sounds good. It's short. It's a bit like Icon back in the days. And we chose BIQH. So
good. Well, we like BIQH. BIQH, short, sharp, and simple. So, but Bernard, a couple of things. I want you to introduce yourself briefly, because I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile on the description. I'm also going to put the BIQH your website, so people, if they want to understand you better, can look at your LinkedIn profile. If they want to understand the company better, they can have a thorough browse around your website. But still, give a very brief who you are and who the company is.
Sure. So again, my name is Bernard Schut, and I've been working at BIQH for around 13 years now. So after graduation, I studied finance.
I thought that was age 12 you started. You're so annoyingly young looking.
Yeah. Am I the youngest one actually in the podcast so far?
I think you are so far. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Cool. Well, so 13 years ago I started with my career, and I didn't know anything about market data. I didn't know it existed actually. I was thinking about it. I did some research with Thomson Reuters data stream during my master thesis actually. So I had some experience with market data, but I was not aware at all. And I thought I was becoming a trader at a bank or somewhere else. And I was called by this recruiter, and he was telling like, hey, do you know this broadcasting network on the Dutch television? It's for financials. It's called RTLZ. And over there you have this ticker tape with the financial news and stock quotes. And I didn't know anything about it. But of course, I saw it on television. So, it's cool. This company is looking for a junior product manager. So, okay, I have no clue what product management is about. Don't know anything about
You were
IT.
really clueless at that point, weren't you?
I didn't know anything about IT or data, but you know, this company, it was like a 20-minute drive, and let's give it a try. So I had this first interview, and it felt like a shot in the rose. It was awesome to hear what these people were doing with big amounts of market data. And at the end, I decided to join the company as a junior. And since then, it went very quick, actually.
Rocket your career upward trajectory. By the way, I'm going to say something about you. You are one of you were the first, and I don't know if anybody else has done it. I think they might have done, to gain all 3 FISD professional certifications. So you can have FIA, FIT, and DLS after your name. Yeah. It's a long thing to have after your name. But that is a fabulous achievement. So
thank you. Yeah, well, I like to read, and I like to learn stuff. So this was also very nice to work at. And looking at the market data industry, I didn't know anything about it, but I really love it because of its complexity, because of the people working in the industry. It feels like a family, and you will recognize
it's small enough, isn't it? It's small enough.
It's a small market. Yeah. And, also the combination, of course, with the financial markets, because this is where I studied for, but also the data and the IT. It's quite a rare combination of skills and capabilities, challenges, which I love, and it all comes together with BIQH. And well, you also asked about what is BIQH doing. So
Yeah, absolutely.
BIQH is
Sell now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, BIQH is a provider of market data management as a solution and as a service. And it basically means that we are helping our customers to solve their market data spaghetti.
You love
Because
that phrase, don't you?
yeah, it's a very
You
cool
love
phrase.
it.
Yeah, we love it.
It always makes me hungry when you talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the spaghetti, it's a kind of a messy thing, and it's a big industry problem, I guess, because everybody is complaining about it because, yeah, well, no overview over data flows, not being compliant towards data vendors or towards exchanges, lock-in situations, well, you name it. It's a big thing,
Well,
and we'll try to yeah
yeah,
to
let's
solve
try and
this.
dive in. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. And as I said, sort of before we got on the call, I'll be honest, I'm not as familiar with BIC as I am with some other companies. And maybe it's not the area I come from either as well. So I'm going to use this opportunity to try and understand, I suppose, two things. One, the problem domain that you and your company are striving to solve. I think that's a good generic, that's a bit more thought leadership. We can talk about your wonderful solution, but I always try to toe down the sales pitch. There's nothing wrong with the sales pitch,
Yeah.
but it's really understanding the nature of the problem that you're trying to solve, that you eloquently describe as spaghetti.
Yeah.
Or is it tagliatelle? Or should it be penne? I mean, sorry, I'm mixing the metaphor terribly,
Uh-huh.
but it's like there are so many dimensions to market data. In fact, let's start with that question. I was talking about this on a podcast I recorded yesterday.
Uh-huh.
When I use the phrase market data, I mean all data that has anything to do with the market. So an enormously broad perspective. Everything really is how I sort of use it. But a lot of people would refer to market data as being more pricing data, from exchanges and what have you. And then they would have reference data, and then they'd have alternate. There's lots of other permutations to the data. Now, I don't say anybody's right or wrong, but I think it's important to understand that. Now, when I look at you sent me some very pretty diagrams, which I'm sure are on your website,
Yeah.
everybody can look at. But I come from a real time market data distribution world. I used to work on Reuters Truck, and then it was RMDS. I'd left by the time it became TREP, and now it's RTDS. And there's a whole little sort of cottage industry of companies. You might have seen Terry Roche's Markets IO. You might have seen Bill Beard's and BCC Group. And they're really, I would say, playing in the real time data feeds, exchange data feeds, aggregated data feeds. That's a particular space.
Uh-huh.
I've also been aware over years and years and years of another space which was called EDM, Enterprise Data Management.
Yeah.
And looking at some of your diagrams, I'm sort of sensing you're a bit of both. If you encapsulate it all.
Yeah.
Have I understood that right? Do you follow my distinction between
Oh yeah.
the sort of real time systems versus
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
enterprise data management, which is more, is it static data, database?
Okay, so
Well, talk me through
yeah.
that to begin
Yeah.
with. Set the scene a bit.
Yeah. So when I'm thinking about market data, I'm using the same terminology as you were using. So it's all data related to financial markets. Could be pricing, could be static, could be reference, symbology, ESG, alternative, whatever. So we are. Let me start saying that we are a new kid on the block within Europe when it comes down to data management. But before we were into data management solutions, and we started this around 2018, actually, we were named Share Company.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe some people know the name Share Company. So the company started like 26 years ago, and we were one of the first companies who brought real-time pricing data to private investors. And this was within a market data terminal. It was called ActiveScreen back then. So we were getting in streaming data, and throughout the years, this more evolved towards business to business, because at a certain moment in time, this broker came to us and they said like, "Hey, you are publishing this static reference data on your website. It was a very popular website, by the way, in the Netherlands. And we would like to white label that. We would like to use it in our portals. Then another customer came and they said, hey, this market data terminal you are having for private investors, could we maybe white label it and
Just
use?
hold. When
Yeah.
you say market data terminal, was it just a browser based? I mean, it wasn't. You weren't coming along in a truck and delivering a physical piece of
No,
screen and keyboard.
yeah, it was already a SaaS solution, you could
Yeah,
say. One
exactly.
of the first ones. And yeah, so indeed. And so these banks came in and they wanted to white label all this stuff. So at a certain moment in time, we made the decision, okay, let's do business to business only. And well, we're getting in the streaming data from a big data vendor, and the data was growing organically based on customer demand. We also got some requests to take in, I don't know, fund data from Morningstar or from Lipper. We had some other requirements for other data sets. So the data grew more and more and more. And at a certain moment in time, we felt like, hey, it doesn't fit into our database anymore. We need to think about normalizing it, consolidating it. So we came up with the idea of having a market data hub. And at a certain moment in time, one of our customers saying like, hey, I really like this philosophy of the market data hub. Because what you guys are doing, you're consolidating all kind of market data flows, whether it's streaming or whether it's static or reference. And would it be an idea to, well, make a new database out of it and to provide us with this, let's say, vendor independent platform? Of course, we wanted to do so. So we we thought, okay, we should rebrand this because this is something totally different than we were used to. Because back in the days we were a reseller of data, but now we were becoming a, let's say, technical facilitator, vendor independent. So this is where BIQH started, the big database, the big consolidated data model, big as a company name as well. And one of these bigger banks in the Netherlands was the launching customer, you could say. And they used our platform to basically replace an end of day feed in
Yeah.
their back office with a combination of 6 different other data vendors. We were able to mix and match all these data vendors together within the vendor neutral database of BIQH. And in the end, we were able to replace their existing feed without any IT impact for their downstream systems in the back office environment. Yeah, and that was to prove that the philosophy about having a vendor independent market data platform was really valid. And from that moment on, more customers followed. And gradually we moved away from the reselling part, you could say, up till the part or the state we are in now. So nowadays we profile ourselves as a market data management provider. I think it's slightly different than EDM.
Right.
Because when I'm thinking about EDM, I'm also thinking about stuff like customer data.
Yeah.
We don't do this. We
Right.
stick to market data. So therefore, we call it market data management. And yeah, I think that tells a little bit the
No,
story.
it does. Now, you threw in a lot of words there, which I'm going to try and unpick. There was database in there. There was hub. There was platform, etc. And again, I'm trying to understand this from your perspective, but also, understand the problems you were trying to solve. You are trying
Yeah.
to solve,
Mhm.
and vendor independence. Now, that's a word that quite a few companies are using, and again, I want to unpick it just to understand what it really means.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, as far as I'm understanding, what you're doing with this market data hub, these databases, even this platform, that is all sitting in the cloud, a cloud. In other words, it's not on premises. It's not. It's software and services that are sitting somewhere in the cloud, and we're going to come on to the SaaS concept in a second. And you use the word databases. Now, I can understand the choice of the word databases when you're talking about more static data that you're building up a database. But when you're talking about real time data, the sort of word databases, you're not really keeping you're keeping a cache maybe,
Yeah, we do.
and what have you. So I'd like to sort of better understand that. And then the vendor neutrality. Now you mentioned you were very diplomatic in not mentioning where you got your data from a data vendor, but as I recall it, they're obviously exchanges are all providing their data, and they will provide their data directly to customers. But you tend to have to be quite a sophisticated customer to be able to ingest direct data from an exchange. So most customers would actually go via an aggregating data vendor. The classic ones being the Bloombergs of the world, being what was Reuters, Thomson Reuters, Refinitiv, now the data and analytics part of LSEG. But then there was also, I remember, and it's now part of ICE, I think, Comstock went into interactive data that then went into ICE. And they always had a nice business model of aggregating all that exchange data and then providing it to other data vendors in a sort of white labeled type approach. And then Morningstar also do stuff, having acquired 10-4. So when you use that phrase, vendor independence,
Yeah.
what do you really mean? Do you break that down a bit?
Yeah. Well, I'm having a nice metaphor, maybe.
Yeah, you like your metaphors. Is it a food metaphor?
Now it's about power,
Okay.
electricity. So I don't know how it's like in the UK, but in the Netherlands, if I would like to switch my energy supplier,
Yeah.
I go to this website and I do a few clicks, and next day I will have another energy provider. And I don't have to change anything. I don't have to change my devices. I don't have to change light bulbs, these kind of things. It's a smoothless transition without any disruption. So
But
that,
but
so
in
so
those
this is
yeah.
how it works in the world of electricity. But if I'm looking into the world of market data, it's a big headache to switch a data vendor. And I understand why this is happening because uh, you know data models, data formats, symbology, it's all being used by consumers in, let's say, a hard-coded way.
Yeah.
It's plugged into the systems and applications, and therefore this lock-in is created.
Yeah.
We really feel that this should change. And this is not about the fact that data vendors are not doing their work properly. In the contrary, I think these are great companies actually. But we really believe that as a consumer, you should be flexible in choosing whatever data source you would like to use. And it should be an easy transition. And we know this is not the case because looking at our customers and at the market data consumers, they struggle with a number of things. First of all, there's really scarce market data knowledge, I would say.
Yeah.
There are not so
Yeah.
many people around
Absolutely.
with this knowledge, because the combination of the data itself, the financial markets, the business needs, but also licensing, for instance, it's a very complicated mix, I would say. So it's not so strange that there's a lack of, I would say, capacity regarding market data knowledge. And then, secondly, we also see that most of our customers are really, really, really busy with keeping up to par with regulations. So there's not time to do any innovation or change in the market data ecosystem. And these kind of ingredients lead to the situation where you're completely stuck. You have this spaghetti, basically, this bowl of spaghetti. And this is where BIQH comes in. This is where we'd like to help our customers to become vendor independent.
And are you following this model, which I would refer to as an abstraction layer?
Yeah.
Because so you're inserting something in between the customer
Yeah.
and all of this multitude of data
Yeah.
vendors. So let me understand the situation. So customer, a bank or whatever, has an enormous connection with data vendor number one. Yeah, so they're pulling in data. Maybe they got data vendor number two really big, sophisticated data vendors. And as you articulated, they would have therefore understood the symbology, the way you actually call records. They would understand the data model, the structure of the data it's come, how it's been normalized, etc. And that, yeah, that's relatively straightforward going into a terminal. But as most people are using non-display, in other words, data is going into applications rather than to eyeballs.
Mhm.
Those things like data models and symbology are all totally wrapped up.
Yeah.
APIs as well in terms of how you integrate with applications.
Yeah.
So in your scenario, if the customer at some point says, well, data vendor number 2, we found data vendor number 3, and actually we can get a better deal, and they seem to have roughly the same data and what have you, so why don't we just switch to them? And then they pause, and then they realize, oh gosh, this is good. This is a
Yeah.
nightmare. You know, it's different symbology, it's different data.
Let's keep
Oh,
it
let's
simple.
just stick with data.
Yeah.
Let's just stick with data. It's easier just to stick with what we've got. It's not that terrible. In fact, it's not terrible at all. And yeah, vendor number 3 is slightly better, but the pain and risk is of changing
Yeah.
is just too difficult.
Yeah.
So in that model, are you inserting yourselves as, the big layer, the big platform, the big hub, whatever we want to call it,
Yeah.
that then does have connections with vendor 1, vendor 2, and vendor 3, and actually 16 other vendors.
Yeah.
And therefore, the customer sitting there, if they are plugged into the big abstraction layer, hub, platform, whatever, with all their applications and uses, could literally flick a metaphoric, a digital switch
Yeah.
and just reroute everything from another vendor 3 in this scenario I've painted.
Yeah.
Is that what you're pitching?
Yeah. You should do sales at big.
Well,
Uh,
yeah.
no, but it's indeed what it is. And so typically, if we would look at our customers, we are talking about on average 20 to 30 different data vendors being used.
Yeah.
And let's take an example for snap pricing data or end of day data. So what would typically happen is that together with the customer, we would look at, first of all, okay, what kind of data do you need and how do you use it right now in your downstream application or system? That's where it's all starting, of course. And well, we will see like, okay, you want to switch to this other data vendor. We already have these feed handlers in place with all these different data vendors. We already normalized the data and their data models into the big market data platform. So then it would simply be a mapping between the downstream system and the way how they are receiving the data right now towards the big data model. So, and we don't do this as a big bang. We are not replacing, I don't know, 30, 40 different vendors all at the same time, of course. It's a very gradual process. So we tend to start with only one downstream system and only one vendor, and let's have the connection in place. And let's learn from each other how we like to work, etc., etc. Then you can expand over time. It's
Now,
like a land and expand kind of business model we are having.
so you've if you implement that, then you've given that customer that flexibility, but you've also made them dependent on you.
Yep.
I've sometimes couched this frying pan into the fire. Yes, you've get nasty lock-in from vendor 1, vendor 2, vendor 3, but now you've got lock-in with BIC.
Yeah.
It's it's not plain sailing. So if somebody does that and then 2 years down the track decides that they don't want to go with BIC,
Yeah. Yeah.
aren't they stuck? Aren't they locked in?
Well, not completely, of course. Of course, there is a slight lock-in, you could say. I'm not lying about it. But still, maybe it's better to have lock-in with only one party instead of 40 or 50 different ones. But that being said, what we do during implementations with our customers, we are taking a careful look at their own symbology. In
Yeah.
most of the cases, they are having their own internal IDs for instruments, for listings, for entities. We also take this data into the big market data platform. They have their own data models within the existing systems, which are consuming the market data. We are taking in these kind of data models as well. We also normalize it into our database we map it all together. And by doing so, we can help customers to become vendor independent. And how's that going? So let's say they would now be tied to, I don't know, a RIG code or Bloomberg ID, a Valora code or whatever. Okay, let's first replace the existing feed as is and don't change anything to the logic. Maybe stick to your existing data vendor as well. Let's work on mapping together this internal data from the customer herself with the external data vendor data. And then in step 2, you could do a switch and you could use your own internal identifier. And then you will need some IT change actually.
So let's dwell on that symbology mapping
Yeah.
part
Yeah.
of the equation, because again, I'm a little bit out of touch with it, but I remember because I used to work for Reuters, and the RIC code, the Reuters identification code as it was created, enabled an enormous amount of stickiness. You know, stickiness is an analogy for lock-in. You know, because vendors love stickiness.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
understand.
stickiness. But I recall, and I don't know if this changed, that Reuters then, and I think Thomson Reuters followed on with it, sort of created rules or contractual things saying you weren't allowed to map the symbology. I'll give a food analogy. My cousin used to work for Bacardi, the rum manufacturer, and he told me a story about the fact that Bacardi got very upset because people would go into bars and they would say, I want a Bacardi and Coke, which is a popular drink. And the bar would just sell them the cheapest white rum that they had, and Coke. And Bacardi got upset and they said, if somebody asks for Bacardi and Coke, you've got to give them Bacardi. You can't, you know, if they say rum and Coke, fine. But if they say Bacardi and Coke, you must give them Bacardi. And I think the analogy with Reuters was Reuters said at one point, if somebody's using a RIC code, they are asking for Reuters data, and therefore you can't use a mapping of a RIC code. So let us say Reuters, whatever was vendor 2 or whatever, and you switched to vendor 3, but all the mapping in all your systems was using the RIC code, and then trying to map that to the symbology that vendor 3 used. You could argue, it could be argued that, well, hang on, those applications, those internal customers thought they were getting Reuters data, and now they're not, and I mean,
Absolutely. But this is also not the thing we are doing, of course. We are not delivering a RIG code with data from another data vendor, of course, because it's simply not allowed. So in these cases where a downstream system is really depending on RIG codes, then the only choice is LSEC.
right?
That's simply.
Because do they still enforce that sort
sure.
of?
But we also know, okay, the RIG code is being depending on, I think it's an ISIN code, I think it's a currency and a market ID, something like that. And this kind of logic, we apply that to what we call our record linking functionality, where we map together all the external vendor symbologies. So if you know how to make a RIG code, then you also know, okay, we can map it to another vendor code, theoretically, but also to the internal identifier of a customer, their own symbols.
Yeah.
And then you could say like, okay, you're now using this LSEC feed. Maybe you would like to move to another data vendor, I don't know. Then you would need to implement another symbol. It could be another data vendor symbology. But maybe it would be better to use your own internal symbology because that's really vendor independent. And we take care of the whole mapping behind it. So we know if you are requesting data with your own internal ID, that we need to go to FactSet, or we need to go to SIX, or we need to go to whatever data vendor. So from our perspective, this is one of the ways to become vendor independent and not to get depending on BIQH as well. Because we could also push our own symbols. We also have our own IDs, of course. We could create this stickiness as well. But then, we are not living up to our mission to make the market data industry a fair marketplace.
Because I suppose if people were using their own a bank had its own symbology, then
Uh-huh.
at some point, and I don't wish this upon you, they could say, right, we're going to replace BIC with and there's a number of companies who are telling a similar story to you because it's a good story. You know, it's not a bad thing. It's just actually other people have reached the
Yep.
same conclusions that you have and are building
Yep.
systems that are trying to disrupt the status quo and this sort of concept of some sort of abstraction layer. I mean, what remaining on the symbology discussion, because symbology is very closely related to identifiers, and I'm curious on your how you're affected or what your point of view is on the controversy about things like QSIP that's gone on recently, and then you've to a lesser extent ICE, and you mentioned Valoran. I mean, these are the identifiers from different exchanges. Or QSIP isn't per se. I mean, it's a. I get confused by the controversy, but it's controversial, I believe, because a lot of the banks and what have you, and I suspect yourselves feel that they've been forced to spend a lot of money paying to QSIP. What are you? Does that affect you? Are you involved in that controversy? Does it affect you?
Well, BIC also has to have her licenses in place with firms like USIP, of course. Yeah, it's hard to change anything about it, is it?
Yeah.
From my perspective, at least. So, but yeah, therefore we set up this whole mapping infrastructure that you would be able to use other identifiers as well, at the least. And yeah, whether it's a QSIP, whether it's a Open Fiji, in the end we are, yeah, it's also, it might sound a bit strange, but we don't really care what kind of symbology is flowing in, which kind of symbology will be used by the customers. And yeah, we are seeing customers complaining about these kind of things going on. But yeah, I think the only way to handle this would be regulation, actually. But not sure of who the regulator should be, because we are living in Europe and I'm living in the EU, and we have the Americas, of course. So who's going to tell us how we
Well,
should deal with this then?
let's talk about regulation because again, a phrase I've used on a few podcasts now. I believe regulation follows there's a phrase, I don't know where it came from. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think all this regulation is well intended. Everybody, all the regulators, all the start out trying to make the world fair, the markets fairer, better, whatever. But, and it's a big but, what we seem to end up with is some incredible bureaucratic series of regulations that, and bless them, the regulators, they're not stupid people. I mean, I've met quite a few, they're clever people. But frankly, they dip into this market data world every so often. They're doing lots of other things as well at the various. I mean, what is it? I always get confused. The AB, whatever the Dutch one is. You got the FCA. All these regulators.
Yeah.
Even ESMA, the European. They dip in and out, and then they create these regulations, which my simplistic observation, they seem to cause more problems than they solve.
Yeah.
I mean, what? And I'm curious which regulations you're seeing have most day-to-day impact on you. I mean, it's I suppose the MiFID two, and then a lot of the consolidated tapes and is it the RC? I don't follow all of this in vast detail. And then DORA seems to have. I mean, which regulations are you most animated? Which do you have to pay most attention to?
Well, I think one which is popping into mind is the SFDR regulation. We had a
Okay,
couple of
which
years
I'm
ago.
not as familiar. Talk me through that.
Yeah, so SFDR is basically about sustainability,
Yes, that was it. Yeah.
and it's about whether you mark your investments as green or as gray, and these kind of classifications. And there's a lot of data involved to make this to basically indicate how green your investments are and whether or not you're not greenwashing, so to
Yeah.
say. And what I remember from this SFDR regulation, that it took a long time before it became entirely clear what the requirements would be, the regulatory technical standards.
Is it entirely clear even
Oh,
now?
probably not. No, so it took a long time, and our customers were really struggling with it. So, okay, how should we interpret these kind of things? And on top of that, what I also saw, and that's really remarkable, I would say, um, market data is kind of centralized, is it? It's centralized into systems, it's centralized into departments, a market data team or procurement
Yeah.
team with the bigger institutions, of course. But for SFDR, there was a lot of ESG data needed. And what happened? It went all over the place. So it was not handled centrally. Requirements were not that clear until the very last moment. And as a result, another spaghetti drama evolved, I would say.
Yeah.
It was unclear requirements, a lot of new data coming in. ESG data was back then, maybe still is, quite immature. And we are having the same issue again, which we are seeing as well with the market data spaghetti, but now for ESG data. And it all was, I would say, triggered by this new SFDR regulation back then. So, yeah, what I'm seeing, maybe that's my conclusion on this question. Data governance is vital to be able to cope with new regulations and to understand what you need to arrange. And
Let me pick you up on that because I remember data management, which you are a data management system company, whatever.
yeah,
Data governance. The two words, the two phrases sound similar, but they're different. My simplistic understanding of data governance is having an approach and an operational setup to do your data management. Like, well, who is responsible for that, and what are the rules about their response? How do we monitor that? All the operational processes that you've set up to manage your data. Have I?
yeah, that's I think one of the two big chunks. So indeed, we have all this how shall I say directories of different type of users and people who can access the data, can do certain stuff like, I don't know, enriching the data, these kind of things. But I think the other side of the medal would be compliance towards the data or the IP owners, the data vendors, the data originators. So
But that's really
that's,
easy because all the
well,
policies are
it's
so
not
simple and
easy.
straightforward, and
No, it's not
they're
easy.
all written in the same language. Sorry, I'm being
Yeah, I
facetious.
know. Yeah, yeah. So we at this moment we are connected with around I think 130 different data sources,
Yeah,
and we are getting in the contracts of our customers with these data sources, and then we are looking into this contract and we are seeing like, okay, this kind of asset type you can only use it in a front office system.
yeah.
This data point it's really costly, so you shouldn't request it too much, etc., etc., etc. And this is very complex, and this is also a huge part of the data governance we
And
have to apply within the platform and within the services, of
because
course.
that touches another phrase which we've been talking about in the FISD world for a while, digital rights management, DRM, because there seems to be a massive desire, understandably,
Yeah,
to try and digitize all these contractual terms, obligations, rights, and what have you,
yeah,
to automate some of that because it has been a very manual process where can we use this data in this office in this way. Well, Fred will have to go and reread the contract and based on your question and come up with an answer. That's the way it was done. I think it's still the way it's done because I don't believe the automation of all these digital rights has happened. I mean, is that something you guys are involved in, or are you trying to leverage up what other
yeah, well,
firms are doing out there?
absolutely. So, well, the good news is we are able to entitle and authorize data to the most granular level available within the database and the data model. So that's all there.
Right.
However, it's all about the requirements coming in from the data vendors. And indeed, they are looking very mixed, you could say. So, yes, we are having talks with numerous, well, let's say specialists like Calero.
Yeah.
Alison was also on the podcast, but also TRG Screen, DRDM from
Yeah.
CJSD,
Yeah.
etc. Because, yeah, it's a big pain 3DI as well, by the way. It's
Yeah.
also they
I
are
mean,
also
there's a
organizing.
lot of companies
Yeah, there
trying
are
to
a lot
sort
of
of
them.
find
Yeah.
solutions in that
Yeah, and of
space.
course we are looking for ways how to make sure that we can basically automate this as well within the platform, because our philosophy is that all manual actions within the market data platform should be automated. So the
Yeah.
same goes for governance actually. But we are not there yet. We are absolutely not there
It's
yet.
a journey. It's a
Yeah, it
journey.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the wonderful phrase.
And I
So
think
so
I
it's
think also
interesting.
think AI is really a game changer with this.
I have heard that. I was talking on the phone a couple of days to a new company that popped up called Post Sig. You look them up, and maybe I'll put you in touch with them.
Yeah.
It's a guy called Hendrik Bardel. I'll probably mispronounce his name as well. He's German American, but used to work for FactSet Value. Anyway, they seem to have come up again with an AI based solution for sort of reading and digesting and converting contracts into sort of understandable. So you've got what you just described there. Sounds like you've got a robust entitlement system. Again, apologies, ex Reuters DAX was the data access control system was the Reuters variation. And another dimension that I know people are struggling with is usage, because entitlements is how you set up the system. Because most contracts, as I understand it, give you pay for permission to have data in advance. Whether you use it or not is
Yeah.
not the issue.
Yeah.
You've got the right to use it is what you've paid for. But obviously, to make sure you're cost effective, you also then want to see what people actually looked at. And I presume the big challenge, the big thing people are seeking to do then is if they find whole groups of people not using data that they paid for, well, then let's cancel that data. I mean, is that a part that
Yeah.
usage tracking?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one of the, let's say, USPs of Big, that we are looking behind the shoulders of our customers to see like, okay, what are you doing with this data? Because what we are seeing, a couple of things. First of all, let's imagine a big risk management system sitting in a bank, and it needs like 30 to 40,000 instruments on a daily basis. And the funny thing is, well, it's not so funny at all actually. They are requesting around 5 to 10,000 instruments which are already, I don't know, expired. They don't exist anymore. So why request this kind of information? And especially why request this kind of information at data vendors who are having these consumption models in place?
So you might be paying supposedly to act
Stuff
something
you
that
don't need.
doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't exist, you don't need it at all. Secondly, talking about usage, let's say we are a slightly bigger financial institution and we have like 10 different systems in need of the same data vendor and same data, market data. These 10 different downstream systems are all requesting their data independently at the data vendor. Let's say it could be, I don't know, maybe a Datascope Select, or it could be a data license from Bloomberg. And yeah, maybe it would be better, well, I know the answer. It would be better to first deduplicate all these request files from these 10 different downstream systems, get a unified list basically, a unified universe, and only request the data once.
And sort of hold it in some sort of database or cache for. But aren't some of the
There's a lot of efficiency gains still to do.
yeah.
Also for companies who are already having an EDM system in place or a market data management system, because this is where the details are. The devil is really in the details in terms of usage.
And there's an interesting trend going on in terms of the policies and terms and conditions that a lot of data providers are providing, where they're starting to say, well, just because you bought that bit of data, that doesn't mean you can do whatever you want with it. If you use it in 5 different scenarios, there's a charge for each of those 5 scenarios. Because I think they've cottoned on to the fact, well, actually, if with cleverer systems, if they just charge for a single item of data going to that bank, they're missing a trick. Is that something you've noticed?
Oh yeah, these kind of use. Yeah, well, we are looking at we are seeing the contracts, and these kind of use cases are all in there, and we need to make sure that we apply these kind of use cases and that we make sure that our customers are compliant. So yes, absolutely.
So what about another angle? And we're sort of creeping up to 15 minutes to go. But another angle that I would ask you about is, support. Well, actually, two things. Actually, before I go on to support, I'm going to ask you about support. SaaS, software as a service, or just the whole as a service, and the concept of managed services. And there's a lot of people talking about this, a lot of people. And I sometimes wonder whether it all gets a bit muddled up. Talk me through the wonders and the benefits of SaaS. Because didn't the top guy at Microsoft say something recently where he said SaaS is dead?
Yeah.
What's your view on this debate?
Yeah. So first of all, yes, we are a SaaS company and we do work with a private cloud.
Right.
That's, I think, already important to mention here. So we are not doing public cloud as of yet.
Right.
Big question is whether we should do it. Because at this moment, using a private cloud, we can do maintenance and support all at the same time for all customers.
Yeah.
So that's really scalable, you could say. And when you have a certain...
And private cloud is just, you've got a data center somewhere.
Well, yeah.
I mean, that's private cloud set, but it's a building somewhere with a whole lot of computers in it. Is that?
Yeah. Yeah, but it's the same as Amazon or Microsoft is doing, isn't it? Yeah, so we have our own data centers indeed. And so, and by the way, we also get in some streaming data by the means of lease line connections, because we don't do that over internet because of performance, etc., etc. But getting back to the cloud, so we have this private cloud solution. We don't do public cloud yet. It's something we are thinking about, but a lot of things are happening in the world right now, geopolitically.
Just a few.
Yeah. So yeah, that's an interesting one. How to see how that will develop, at least. But yeah, at least for static reference ESG data, the more static kind of market data, cloud is really suitable, I would say.
And the contrast, what is not cloud would be on-prem. In other words, somehow, if you were running your software, the stuff that does all this abstraction layer, all the clever stuff, if that was sitting on the client's premises and running, that would not be SaaS. So what SaaS means is taking all of that and putting it remotely.
Yeah, you don't have to install you don't get this CD-ROM, like install it on your servers, etc. But one of the main reasons why we really made this choice to go cloud only is we want to be able to help our customers. So if there's any disruption, I don't know, a certain data vendor feed is down or a certain API call is not working correctly, we need to know before the customer knows it. So we have all this monitoring in place. And if something is going wrong, then we are able to solve it within very short timelines because we have SLAs in place, of course. And if this would all be on-premise kind of stuff, then you're having all these dependencies. You don't know what's happening to the service where the platform is running on. It might be difficult to get access to the platform, and you will lose time in the end. And I believe you will also lose customer satisfaction in the end. So therefore we choose the all-in solution, the platform as a service, SaaS, cloud, and as a service.
And in a sense, you've answered my question or the probe about support, because by its nature, you don't need a massive support team to run to all the different clients. Effectively, it's probably most of your work is done at that data center. And the connectivity from that data center to different data vendors, etc., is the support element.
It's scalable.
Yeah,
that's the cool thing about the business model, I think.
So wrapping up a bit.
Yeah, sure.
A couple of quick questions, then I'll give you a chance to say your final bullet points. Dutch company operating out of the Netherlands. I mean, what are your geographic ambitions and what are your geographic constraints?
Yeah, so indeed we are based in the Netherlands, and we are also we are working for customers in both Benelux, but also the DACH region, also within the Nordics. So you could say Western Europe. This is our core market right now. And yes, we would like to go global, but we take it careful because we want to be able. This is the most important USP we are having. We feel like external colleagues to our customers. They can always ring us. We will also always pick up the phone, etc., etc. So if you would have this customer, let's say, I don't know, in Los Angeles or somewhere in Asia, then you need to provide the same kind of service levels. And this is not where we are right now. We
But
are
in
working
due
on it.
course, in due course.
Yeah, well, absolutely, because
Yeah.
the platform itself, yeah, you can run it everywhere. Of course, it's not bound geographically at all, but it's more on the server side. And well, that's my big challenge together with the team to scale up internationally and yeah, to solve this, let's say, follow the sun service model puzzle in a clever way, not trying to do everything ourselves, partner up with companies who already did it for many years, who have the knowledge in place already, who have local people who talk the language, etc. And yeah,
Oh,
well,
okay.
I
Well, I
really
hope
believe
some
in
people
this partner
listening,
ecosystem
yeah,
approach. So it's
people listening to this podcast can get in touch with you on
yeah,
that front. So look, final. So a question and an opportunity for you to say something. The final question is, what obstacles are there? This can't be plain sailing. It's a brilliant proposition. Yes, I understand all the logic and everything, but what sort of hurdles have you had to overcome? So give us a little bit of the hurdles, and then segue into. I said I'd give you the chance. Is there anything you haven't had a chance to say? Anything that we've missed? I mean, we could. I told you we could have talked for a lot longer than an hour,
yeah,
but we must be disciplined. So,
yeah,
obstacles and hurdles.
yeah. Well, to start at the consumer side, you already raised it, I think, 20 minutes ago, but it's risk of change.
Yeah, risk aversion. Yeah.
That's risk aversion. So our contacts, we are having great contacts with our customers, but also with the prospects, etc. We are working with, and they really believe in the philosophy of vendor independence to have this normalized data model in place, etc. But there are more people to convince. And we are not only talking about market data procurement or market data analysts, we are also talking about IT, could be a product owner. We are talking about operations. We are talking about a very big cloud of people who need to have an opinion about moving to a platform like BIQH, yes or no. So that's hard, that's difficult. So therefore we also try to make it a little bit more small because it's not necessarily the case that you have to implement this market data platform and replace all your current ecosystem, etc., etc. You can also just start with one feed
And
and one
it's
system.
a sort of proof of concept then, isn't
Exactly.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the way how we like to approach it. Have these proof of concept, prove ourselves, and prove that we are able to, I don't know, integrate a data vendor feed in a matter of hours instead of months. And by building this trust, then the door will open further. And yeah, you will in the end grow further. But yeah, it takes time. It's not a very fast business actually.
And there are a number of firms, frankly, telling a similar story and facing similar obstacles. So it's an interesting thing, and it begs a question about the power of the frankly, I'm going to use the phrase dominant players, the status quo.
Yeah,
And it's where
maybe.
I came from.
Yeah,
I came from Reuters, and they've established an incredible presence in the market. And there's a debate going on about how healthy that is. Anyway, I promised you, we've got literally, 5 minutes worth of what did we miss? What did you want to say, and I didn't let you?
well, we talked about a lot actually, so that's good. But maybe it's good to mention that I really believe that market data is not the core business of a financial institution.
Okay.
It's the lifeblood of a financial institution. It's very relevant to have market data, but in my opinion, handling market data, feed handling market data, scrubbing, cleaning, all these kind of things, this is typically something you would outsource. And well, again, I talked about our ambition to make the switch of a data vendor as easy as doing an energy supply switch back home.
Yeah.
Technically we are there. Technically we are already there. So it's a matter of, I think, belief within the market, but it's also a matter of trust. And I guess it's also a matter of, well, we talked about all these different contracts and different symbologies, etc. Standardization is vital.
Yeah.
And I'm really eager to see whether we can play a certain role in this to make this marketplace more fair and standardized. And then you could say market data or market data management could become a commodity and not a headache for a financial institution, where a lot of people and disciplines are needed to do the management, to solve issues all the time. Yeah, it should be easy.
No, and look, that standardization point, again, I've been involved in FISD for many, many years, and that has been a goal of so many people in the industry, but it's been a struggle. And to be honest, we at FISD, we struggle to make it happen because there are so many divergent opinions and points of view, and people have logical reasons for not wanting to give up how they structure their terms and conditions and describe whatever. I mean, what I have heard, a couple of things I've heard, a desire to maybe get some common language, which is not the same. I think standardization implies everybody having the same structure of terms and conditions and whatever,
Yep.
which is going to be really hard to get. I mean, we should always strive for it. We shouldn't give up, but it's really hard. But maybe there's another sort of interim thing of common language. And I know there are people out there talking about that. And then, as you mentioned, AI, is there as a tool potentially to do some of this for us? So I think that's an interesting. And also, I think your point about sort of outsourcing, which I think is very tightly linked with the SaaS model. When people talk about SaaS, they talk about managed services, and it means outsourcing some of the workload, the workflow,
Yep.
to a remote place where you can somehow kick in economies of scale. I mean, that's a whole.
Yeah,
We haven't got time. It's a massive conversation about where managed services work. Where don't they work? I don't know. I mean, I'll finish off. Is it? And I love using all these idioms or whatever. It's always difficult asking turkeys to vote for Christmas. I don't know if we eat turkey at Christmas, so maybe the Netherlands you don't eat turkey at Christmas, but
Maybe some final words from my side. I really love to work at this disruptive company. I
yeah,
think we are shaking up the market data industry. Maybe not at the global scale yet, but we will come.
yeah,
And I think it opens the path to new disruptive players as well. Also at the side of data vendors or data originators who don't have this, let's say, legacy in place and this existing positions within the market. So yeah,
and you're not alone. There's a lot of disruptors out there. I think a lot of responsibility sits at the customer end because the customers want disruption until they don't want it. They want it if it's easy and risk free, but it probably isn't easy and risk free. And again, we haven't got time to discuss it. But another thing I've noted is the small company versus the big company. You're not a big company. You're not, frankly, as big as LSEG and Bloomberg or even FactSet and whatever. And there's a number of other players who are a similar size to you. And I know that big customers are very risk averse when it comes to dealing with small companies. I don't know if it's right or wrong. I sort of feel it's wrong, but it's
yeah,
easy
but
for me to say that.
no, DORA also applies to us, and we are also SOC 2 certified. We are also ISO certified. So yeah, where's the risk? I would say,
And I think that's a good conclusion.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's risk free. That people should spend bucket loads of money on BIC. It's a great solution. David Anderson says so. It must be true. I think it's really interesting what you're doing. I'm so glad, so thankful that you've sat here on my podcast. And
Was an
so
honor.
yeah, I'll bid you farewell and say thank you.
Okay, thank you.